Hello everybody, it's Jen, Scrapbena Creations. We're going to jump right into making 4 cards with the March Flavor of the Month card kit by Scrapping for Less. This card kit is all about different kinds of celebrations, and I'm going to start off with a baby card. So I'm using the stamp set in the baby collection. In the stamp set, there's this adorable little bunny rabbit and a bear, and then there's some blocks that say baby. So I am starting off doing a lot of masking for this card. I stamped out the bunny first and cut out a mask with Simon Says Stamp masking paper, covered up our little bunny, and then went ahead and stamped the first block with our letter B, and also masked that as well so that I could stamp out the A. And I'm going to be stamping out the blocks in a wonky kind of pattern. I wanted to add some interest to the card by having them kind of front and back, and then having the B block here again more to the front, and then ending it off with the Y block. So just quickly stamping these up and masking them. I know sometimes people have a lot of questions about masking. You want to make sure the image you want in the front is stamped first. So you can see here I'm positioning the little bear, and I'm going to stamp that before I stamp the Y block because I actually want our little bear here to be in front of that block. And I'm just making sure, using the mask, that I have this in the exact place that I want it. So sometimes you can use your masks as a little bit of a guide. And then I'm just getting this little bear down into its final place, and I'm going to stamp that down. I'm using my Lawn Fawn jet black ink because I am going to be doing some Copic coloring once I add this final element to the card to make our little scene card here for today. I'm going to stamp that down, and then I'm going to add the mask because I am going to use some Distress Oxide here for the background. So I'm using Salty Ocean and a makeup brush, and that little piece of paper I'm just using to dab off. So I want to have a blue background here, very soft and subtle, but just framing the image, and using some white space here as an added element for the focal panel of my card. So now I'm going to take up all of these masks, and this is the fun part where you get to see how all of your stamping turned out. While I have my stamp platform out, I'm going to stamp the sentiment. So I'm using the sentiment congratulations. You see there, my die got in the way of the magnet there, but I want to make sure, because I am going to be cutting this panel out with that stitched rectangle die, that my sentiment is where I want it to be. So for the sentiment, I'm using some Versafine Clair. This is a pigment ink, and it is wonderful for giving, really great crisp sentiments. So now that I have that done, I'm going to color the images. So for my blue colors, I'm using B97 as the dark, B95 as my midtone, and B93 as my lightest shade. Going through here, just mapping out where I want those shadows to be, which will be under the bunny, and then on the top parts of the block, as well as the front part to that right side that's going towards the back, if that makes any sense. So I'm just going to go darkest to lightest, moving through those colors. And these images are fairly small, so they're pretty easy to color up. I'm going to do all of the blocks the same way. In terms of shadowing for the rest of the blocks, there'd be a shadow where any of the blocks touch, and then upwards to the top, I just wanted to add a bit more dimension for the sides of the box on the top that are going towards the back. So as you can see, really quick coloring here. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the letters, but in the end decided, well, not even in the end. Once I was on that second block, I decided that I wanted to color them in blue as well. So I'm just going back through with the same markers and coloring that in. I didn't want all of the blocks to be blue, so I'm going to use some warm gray colors for the other two blocks. So I'm using warm gray 3, warm gray 1, and W00, and just mapping these out again, similar to the way that I added the shading to the blue blocks. Coloring those up really quickly. I am going to use some warm gray tones for our little stuffed animals here, so for the bunny and the bear. So I'm going to bring in the warm gray 5, so I'll be using the W5 as my darkest, and then W3 and W1, so they will blend really well with the lighter color of the blocks, but they will look like a different color because I'm bringing in that darker warm gray 5. So you could definitely do a 2-color blend on these images if you wanted to. They're tiny enough that you would get away with 2 colors. But I did just want to add some fun shading to these cuties. And get the bear colored up, and then I'm going to color the bunny the same way, adding some shading to the ears and kind of around his face, the neck, the top of his arms, because his head would cast a shadow, and then in between his little legs there. Going to color most of the ears in with the warm gray 3, and then just leaving a little bit of space here, coloring most of the bunny in just with 2 colors, and then leaving it a bit lighter for his belly and the ears. So I'm doing them both with R20. Gave them a little bit of rosy cheeks, and then I'll come in and I'm actually going to bring in my C1 marker just to blend that out. So I'm going to use some of the cool grays for the front of the blocks because I actually want them to look white. Just using a little bit of C1 there, blending it out with the C00. I think I only have the C3 up here because I am going to use that for some of the grounding on our images here. So here's where I'm bringing in the C3. I want to make sure that my images look grounded and not like they're floating kind of in mid-air. So that's why I'm doing this. I'll blend out the C3 with the C1, and then I will come in and blend those out with the C00. And for all my cards today, I'm using Spectrum Noir Premium cardstock for the cardstock that I'm coloring on, and then Recollections 110-pound cardstock for any white card bases that I use. I'm going to cut out this panel using the stitched rectangle die. I'm also going to use 2 of the papers that I received in my collection, and I'm going to cut both of those out with some larger rectangle dies. This is a pretty clean and simple card layout. I want the block pattern on the bottom to really stand out, and then the focal panel, of course, to be the star of the show. But you'll notice I did color up the blocks so that they will mimic the same colors in the pattern paper that I used. I decided to go ahead and pop up my panel here on some fun foam. So I'm just going to cut that down so that it fits, and I'm going to add some double-sided adhesive here. This is very strong adhesive. Works great, but you only get one chance to actually place it where you want it, which can sometimes be a bit of a challenge, but I'm going to try to get this centered up as much as possible. Love how that card turned out. I'm going to stamp the sentiment that came with this stamp set on the inside, and it just reads, "Having a baby will open your heart more than you ever imagined." So I thought that was a great way to finish off this first card. I will take one of the stickers that come in the collection as well, because I got a little bit of ink on the inside there. So I chose this little heart with the button, and I'm going to add that to the inside of the card. Once I get that done, I will adhere the panel onto my card base. I just needed to use my Teflon bone folder here to make sure that that card was nice and flat, and then using some liquid adhesive to just adhere that down. And of course I used a little bit too much glue. This is a new to me glue. It's the Thermo iCraft glue. So just getting used to the pressure that I need for that glue. You don't want to have too much glue or you'll get some warping. So now that I have that complete, I'm just going to do some final detailing here. I'm going to use the Nuvo drops in Morning Dew, which come in the banana split level, just to add some dimension to those blocks and to give it a little bit of something extra. So that's card number 1. Let's jump into card number 2. I just couldn't help myself with the adorable little stuffies here. So I'm going to do another baby card. I'm going to use the little bunny because there's a piece of the pattern paper that has the bunny in a kind of a darker pink, a mid-tone pink, and then a white. And I wanted to use that for the card. So I'm going to stamp out my little bunny and mask him. And you'll notice here that the mask is blue. This is the same mask that I used for the first card. With the Simon Says stamp masking paper, you can use it more than once. I'll just have to be careful here not to spread around any of that blue Distress Oxide that is left over on that mask. I'm going to bring in this balloon stamp and stamp that down and have it looking like my little bunny is floating in the air. With the balloon stamp, there is little tails for the balloon, and I'm just trying to figure out how I should best stamp this. I thought about doing it underneath the bunny, but I thought that that might make it look like the bunny has a stringy tail hanging down, so I ended up doing it right under his arm. I'm going to mask off the balloons. I'm going to do another soft background with Distress Oxide similar to the one I did for the first card. This time I'm going to use Worn Lipstick. I am absolutely loving this look. I think it just adds a really pretty soft detail to the back of your cards with very little effort. So still allowing them to be very clean and simple, but really allowing the images to pop with that little bit of color behind them. So I'm going to lift up my masks and then I'm going to work on the coloring for this card. Now I'm going to do the balloons in a darker pink, so I'll use the R39, the R85, and the R83 for that. I'm going to do a lighter pink and then I'm going to do some of the balloons white because I'm going to also color my little bunny in white and color it up similar to the white bunny that is on the pattern paper. So for the shading with the balloons, you just want to make sure that your darkest shadows are where any of the balloons are behind another balloon. And it's pretty easy to map out with your lightest color and just kind of go through the balloons and figure out which ones are in front and which ones are behind. Once I get the darker red ones colored up, I'm going to come in and do the lighter pink. For those, I'll be using the R85, the R83, and the R81. Now you can see when I'm doing this that a lot of the darkest color in those first balloons with the R39 has pulled back a lot. So I've decided to come back in and go over them again with a second coat, darkening them up. And I really like the way that those turned out. Once I get the darker pink balloons finished, I'm going to move on to the little bunny itself. So for the bunny, I'm just going to be using the R85, the R83, and the R81. I'm going to add some pink to his ears and that little stitching on his head, his nose, the little tummy, and then the pads of the little bunny's feet. This will just add a cute kind of color, little bit of color to what is going to be a mostly white bunny. So here's where I'm going to do the white. I'm going to use my cool gray markers for that. So I'm using C3, C1, and C00. Now technically there wouldn't necessarily be a shadow on that front white balloon, but I just wanted to add a little bit of interest to that balloon, so I did go in with the darkest color on the left-hand side. I'm adding some shadowing to the bunny, but making sure to leave most of the bunny white. I'll blend that out with the C00, and then our elements here are complete. Decided to bring in the colorless blender for the balloons just to really pull back that gray, and then I'll finish up with the bunny. And then we will move on to creating the rest of the card. So for the little bunny, I decided to bring in my black glaze pen for the eyes, and now I'm going to add some detailing with my white Signo gel pen, and all of the products will be listed in the description box below. For the sentiment, I am bringing out my Clair ink again, and I'm going to use the sentiment floating by to say, so this is in the stamp set with the balloons, and then I'm going to bring in the congratulations stamp from the other stamp set to make my own sentiment that fits for this card. So you'll notice there that I didn't quite get a good impression with the floating by, so I just brought in my marker there just to fill that back in, and no one will ever know. And now I'm using a cloudy border die from Pink and Maine, and for some reason I had trouble with it cutting out. I think I need to get some new pads for my Big Shot. So for the second one that I'm doing, I decided to use my Lawn Fawn metal shim plate, and that you can see cut it out perfectly. So I'm going to have the little bunny paper as the kind of background for my focal panel, and then in the back of that there's this adorable little pink and white pattern paper that I will use as the back panel, which will go directly onto the card base. I'm going to get that in place. I didn't quite get it down where I wanted to the first time. The iCraft glue is wonderful in terms of its bond. It does say on the bottle Ultra Bond Adhesive, and I've noticed that I don't have as much give in terms of time to kind of move things along, so you need to be really quick with it. But the good thing was that I could still pull it up a little bit. Well, I could pull it off and redo it, and it was fine. So I decided to pop up this little cloudy border here on some foam adhesive, and that piece wasn't sticking, and I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized I had forgotten to take the piece of release paper off that particular little piece. So once I figured that out, I was able to go ahead and insert this panel into the frame. And because I cut it out with that same die, it fits perfectly in there. And that will be it for the second card, besides a little bit of Nouveau Glimmer Shimmer, Glitter Shimmer Pen, Nouveau Shimmer Pen, just to give the balloons a little bit of glitter. So there's card number 2. And now we can move on to card number 3. I'm going to be using the balloons again for this card. I just really loved how pretty that bunch of balloons was. I'm going to do a very subtle background. This time I'm using Distress Oxide in Peacock Feathers. So I'm going to use this mini cloud edge stencil by My Favorite Things. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stencil on some of these clouds. So with this stencil, you just simply keep switching the sides and it will give you a different pattern of clouds, which is really great. I'm just working on a piece of laminated cardstock there, so you can see I can pick up some of that ink that I've tapped off onto it. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of ink where the white parts are. I did get a little bit of a smudge and I was trying to fix that, but wasn't quite as successful as I was hoping to be. And here's where I'm going to start stamping down my balloons. So I knew that I wanted to have 3 balloons on this card, so I wanted to get the first one down first. So I stamped that down I'm using the little bow that comes in the stamp set as well as the little ends of these strings for the balloons. Once I get that one done, I'm going to add the second bunch of balloons and then the third, and then I'll finish off with the detail stamping of the bow and the little strings. I'm not worried about coloring for this stamp set, or for this card I mean. I went ahead and pre-colored the images just because you've seen how I colored them in the second card. So I'm going to cut this out as a panel with a stitched rectangle die. And here's the balloons. So I colored one bunch of balloons in pink, purple, and then an aqua color. I thought these were really pretty soft colors. So I'm going to be making a birthday card for this one. So I'm going to pop up the balloons on some foam adhesive. And then once I get those in place, I'm going to work on the sentiment. So in this stamp set, it says floating by to say, and then you have the option of using happy birthday or hello. So the happy birthday or hello would have worked perfectly fine for this stamp set. I thought it would just be fun to make a birthday card. So now that I have those in place, I'm just going to adhere on the little bows that I colored up in the matching colors. I fussy cut those out and I'm just adhering them down with some liquid adhesive. And here's where I'll work on the sentiment. So I'm just stamping using the Versafine Clair on some white cardstock. I'm going to cut these out as best I can using my Tim Holtz Tonic trimmer. And I actually make a mistake with the to say part. I cut it, you'll see right here, really close. So I end up re-stamping it and cutting that one out a second time, which you'll see here in a second. So I'm going to use the floating by and the happy birthday from the first time I stamped it out. And then here's where I'm making sure I don't make the same mistake again. I'm going to cut that down on the sides, and then I'm going to do some trimming with my scissors as well, just so that I have equal amounts of white space on either side of those sentiment strips. Once I get those trimmed up, I'm going to lay them out and figure out where I want them to go on the card. And you'll notice here that I, for some reason, put the happy birthday on the top, and I don't even realize that until I stick it down here, that I have this sentiment totally backwards. So here's where I realized, but luckily I was able to get that up very easily. I do have to peel up the foam adhesive, and then now we have the right sentiment at the top. I'm just going to lay those out across the panel of my card, so filling in some of that white space. And then the happy birthday will go right there under the purple card, or purple balloons. To finish off again, I want to give those balloons some interest by adding some white gel pen. So now that I have that complete, I'll add the panel to my card base, and I am leaving some white around the edge just to frame that card up nicely. So for the fourth and final card, I'm using this adorable stamp set by Stamping Bella, and it has these two women on the front, which I think this image is absolutely adorable. It's like they're in a little Polaroid of a picture together. So for ease sake, I just decided to do their skin tone the same color. So I'm using E13, E11, and E00. And I will add a little bit of R20 for their cheeks. I really enjoyed coloring up this image a lot. I just thought it was so sweet, something a little bit different that I haven't really seen before. I'm making sure to have a lot of shadows there where their fingers are touching and where their indents are for each of their fingers. Then of course there'd be shadows under their hair. and their neckline as well. So once I get the skin colored up, I'm going to add the little bit of rosy cheeks like I mentioned. Just making sure that I get this nice and blended. Went out of the lines a little and just needed to fix that up with my colorless blender. For this girl on the right, I'm going to make her a blonde. So I'm using E35, E53, E51, and E11. This is kind of a combination that I've recently discovered and I really like, but I find the first time I go over it, whenever I use this color combination, I'm a little nervous, so I don't quite get the look that I'm going for on the first time, but that's okay because the great thing about alcohol markers is they will lay and blend nicely over top of each other. So you can see here how much better the blend and color is on my second go around, and I love the way that that turned out. For the girl on the left, I'm going to make her a brunette. So I'm using E49, E27, E51, and E35. I'm just bringing in the E35 right now and marking where I want the darkest spots to be. This will help me when I'm laying down the E49, which I'm using right now. Just adding a little bit of curls to her messy buns there on either side. The lines are already drawn in, so it's pretty easy to follow them and get some texture in her hair. So this is actually a really great image if you want to practice your coloring, if you're newer to coloring. And then for more seasoned colorists, it's fun because there is so much texture in her hair. So just going through my markers from darkest now back down to lightest, and I'm already back down to the E35 here. Really like the way the brunette and the blonde together play off each other to kind of have the opposites of color side by side. For the shirt for the woman on the right, I'm using blues. So I'm using B97, B95, and B93. The colors for their clothing are inspired by the pattern paper that I'm going to use that came in the collection. So just going through the colors here, I did start off with the darkest color for her, and then a little bit of the mid-tone, and now I'm coming in with the B93. I wanted her shirt to be more of a lighter color, so I was pretty light-handed with my darkest and my mid-tones. For the girl on the left, I want to have a light green color, so I'm using G43 as my darkest, G21, and G40. And again, I want this to be quite light, so I'm leaving a lot of space for the lightest color. Now I wanted to have it look like they were outside, so I'm just going to use my B00 marker here, and I'm going to color in the inside of that Polaroid with my blue, and that will mimic the sky in terms of what I kind of had envisioned for this card. I'm just going to lay down a layer of that. I'm trying to make sure as much as possible that I'm going the same way with my marker. That will help with lines, but I end up kind of going the other way there. It really doesn't matter. When you're doing a light layer like this, it will blend together quite well. So I wanted to add some shading to the Polaroid so it didn't look flat. So I'm just bringing in my C markers here. I added the C3 underneath the picture itself, and then just using the C1 and the C00 for the other sides of the cards. Once I get that done, I will fussy cut that out. I've gone ahead and cut my panel, so I'm using some rounded rectangles by Hero Arts for the pattern paper with the birds on it, and then a scalloped die from MFT for that mint green paper. I wanted there to be a bit of interest and some color to pop out behind the white from that paper with the birds. So I'm just going ahead and making some of my own colored cardstock with one of the markers that I used for the shirts. So I'm using the B93. I did cut that panel out with a stitched rectangle die, and then I'll just layer the panel here with the birds on top of that. I am going to pop that panel up on some fun foam, just rounding the corners so that it fits nicely on that panel. I'll add some double-sided adhesive here really quickly. Adhere that down to the panel, and then I'll adhere that onto the piece of paper that I colored using my Copic marker. I thought that this just added a little bit of interest and helped kind of separate that piece of pattern paper from the mint green one. So now I'm going to add this panel to my card base. Just going to use some wet adhesive for that. I'm going to try to center that as much as possible. Once I get that down, I'll add this other panel. I'm going to try to center that up as much as possible. So the inspiration, as I mentioned, for the clothing really came from these two pieces of pattern paper. I'm going to stamp the hello sentiment that comes in the stamp set with the balloons onto my Polaroid. I thought that would look really cute there. And then that would make it a really adorable kind of anytime, any occasion card. I do stamp the sentiment that comes with that stamp set of the girls. And it says, a best friend is someone who loves you when you forget to love yourself, which is really sweet. So I stamped that on the inside. And then I'm going to adhere the focal image to my card. And you'll notice I did put it a little bit off center just to add a bit of interest. I'm going to use some of the sequins that come in the kit this month. These are a clear iridescent type of sequin. And I'm just going to add a few of those here and there on the card. So there's the fourth and final card. I'm going to slow this down and show you all 4 of the cards from today. I hope you enjoyed the March Flavor of the Month card kit and the inspiration from this video. I do have an unboxing as well in case you want to see exactly what came in the kit this month. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Bye!